Hello my dear students. Today I'll talk about the spinal nerve functional components. This is second lecture of my nervous system anatomy series. Link to the lecture 1 is given in the description below. In the lecture 1 we talk about the basic and the fundamental concept. In this lecture first I will give you a detailed review about the classification of the nervous system, how the nervous system is classified into various categories, into the central nervous system and into the peripheral nervous system. The nervous system is divided into voluntary nervous system and involuntary nervous system. Each of the voluntary nervous system and involuntary nervous system has got a motor component and has got a sensory component. The functions of the nervous system are classified into general functions and the special function. So I'll talk about all these categories in a simple and easy way, and after that I'll talk about the spinal nerve components, how these components are named, what is the composition of these spinal nerve components, what are the neurons that perform these functions of the spinal nerve components, and I will also brief you about the basic structure of the spinal cord, because that is very important in understanding the course of the neurons that form these spinal nerve components. So let's start our lecture now.
So in my today's lecture, I'll talk about the nervous system classification. The nervous system has got various classifications. Number 1, the morphological classification. Nervous system is divided into a central nervous system and a peripheral nervous system. Number 2, the nervous system can be divided according to the response of the body. We don't divide nervous system, we divide our body. Is the response of the body is voluntary or involuntary? So we will have a voluntary nervous system, that is also known as the somatic nervous system, and we will have a involuntary nervous system, that is also known as the visceral nervous system and also known as the autonomic nervous system. We can also divide nervous system on the basis of function. Is the function is a motor function or is it a sensory functions? So the motor nervous system will have efferent neurons that will target an effector. These neurons are also known as the descending neurons. And the sensory nervous system will have afferent neurons, sensory neurons, ascending neurons that will be starting from a receptor. There is another classification of the nervous system on the basis of its functions. The functions of the nervous system can be general and can be special. Whether the functions are motor or sensory, they can be general and they can be special. I will explain shortly. So you can see that we have divided the nervous system into central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. We have divided nervous system into voluntary nervous system and involuntary nervous system. We have divided nervous system into the motor system and the sensory nervous system. We have divided nervous system into a general and a special kind of nervous system. These are the basic classification of the nervous system, and if you understand these basic classifications, then the advanced concepts of the nervous system will be easy and nervous system anatomy will be interesting for you. So keep focused and I'll explain all these categories one by one. Now the first classification of the nervous system, that is, we divide nervous system into a central nervous system and into a peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system consists of brain, that is inside the bony skull, and the spinal cord, that is inside the bony vertebral column. Brain and spinal cord will form the central nervous system. This central nervous system has to coordinate the body functions, and for that purpose it has to communicate. For communication, brain has got 12 pair of the cranial nerves and spinal cord for communication has got 31 pair of the spinal nerves. And these 12 pair of the cranial nerves and 31 pair of the spinal nerve forms the peripheral nervous system. We can say that this peripheral nervous system serves as a waiter for the central nervous system. For coordination, brain and spinal cord requires information that is received by the receptors and they want information to be delivered back to the effectors. This job is done by these 12 cranial nerves and 31 spinal nerves. Hence, we can say that peripheral nervous system is weighted for the central nervous system. Central nervous system consists of brain and spinal cord, and peripheral nervous system consists of 12 pair of cranial nerves and 31 pair of spinal nerves. Look at the diagram here. I'll quickly repeat all these facts. We've got brain and we've got the spinal cord. This is the central nervous system. But for functioning, for controlling the body functions, it requires information to be delivered and information to be received. For that purpose, brain has got 12 pair of the cranial nerves and spinal cord has got 31 pair of the spinal nerves. These two will form the peripheral nervous system. And now the next classification of the nervous system. In this, we don't divide the nervous system. We divide the body according to its behavior, according to its response. The response of the body can be voluntary, that is in our control, that is in our awareness. So the voluntary nervous system, and the behavior of the body response can be involuntary, that is not in our control, not in our awareness. The voluntary nervous system is also known as the somatic nervous system. I will explain shortly what is meant by somatic. And involuntary nervous system is also known as the visceral nervous system of the viscera, and also known as the autonomic nervous system. Nervous system function has got two components. It has got a sensory component and it has got a motor component. Whatever the division of the nervous system, whether voluntary nervous system or involuntary nervous system, both will have a sensory component and a motor component. Otherwise, it will be incomplete. Sensory component, start at a receptor and the information is delivered via the efferent neurons. So this component has got receptor and efferent neurons. And in the motor component, the information will be delivered to the effectors. It will have effectors and the information will be delivered by the efferent neurons. So now you can understand that somatic nervous system will have receptors and will have effectors. Likewise, the visual nervous system will have its own receptors and the effectors. The receptors of the somatic nervous system are exterior receptors that are present in the skin, and effectors of the voluntary nervous system are the skeletal muscles that are in our control, that are voluntary muscles. And the receptors of the visual nervous system are the interior receptors, and they are generally present in the mucosa that lines the body viscera. And the effectors of the visceral nervous system are smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and the glands. So wherever we will have a smooth muscle, we will have a cardiac muscle, we will have a gland. Keep in mind that will be a viscera and will be supplied by the involuntary nervous system. So in the somatic nervous system, we can say we have got a combination of skin and the skeletal muscle. And in the involuntary nervous system, we have got the combination of mucosa, smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and the glands. Let me elaborate further and make things simple for you. We have got two systems, somatic nervous system and the visceral nervous system. Somatic nervous system is for outside of the body and visceral nervous system is for the viscera of the body. Outside of the body, is lined by the skin, and beneath skin we have got the skeletal muscle. So the skin and the skeletal muscle are the sensory and the motor component of the somatic nervous system. Skin, skeletal muscle is the somatic nervous system. Always remember. Likewise, inside of the body, internal lining of the body is mucosa, whether it's the respiratory tract, whether it's the GIT, whether it's the genital tract or the urinary tract. Inside we have got mucosa. And beneath mucosa, this is the mucosa that lines the lumen. Beneath mucosa, we have got the smooth muscle, we have got the glands. So the smooth muscle and the glands. So this is a combination, mucosa and beneath mucosa, smooth muscle and the glands. These two are the sensory and the motor component of the visual nervous system. So remember these facts in a simple way. Each nervous system will have a sensory component and will have a motor component. Sensory component of the somatic nervous system is the skin, which has got the exteroreceptors, and sensory component of the visual nervous system is the mucosa, which has got the interoreceptors. Motor component of the somatic nervous system is voluntary, that is the skeletal muscle. Motor component of the visual nervous system is involuntary, that is not in our control, like smooth muscle glands and the cardiac muscle. So now we know that nervous system has got two major classifications, somatic nervous system and the visual nervous system. Each has got a sensory or an efferent component. This is the efferent component, and each has got a motor component, that is the efferent component. Here you can count functions of the nervous system. These are four general functions of the nervous system. And you know the functions of the nervous system. And you know that these functions are performed by the nerves of the peripheral nervous system, the cranial nerve and the spinal nerves. And these four general functions are termed as components of the nerves. These are the components of the nerves. All these components are general components. First of all, we write down these are general. Then we write down these are somatic or visual. These two are somatic and these two are visual. Next, we have to decide these are sensory or motor. So this is sensory, we write down A for afferent. This is motor, we write down E for the efferent. Here, this is the sensory one, we write A for the afferent, and this is the motor, we write E for the efferent. So the name will be general somatic afferent. Here the name will be general somatic efferent. Name of this component will be general visual afferent, and name of this component will be general visual efferent component. For the general somatic afferent component, what should be one word label? One word label for this is skin, having the stereoreceptors. And for general somatic efferent, one word should be skeletal muscle, that is the voluntary factor. And for general visual afferent, we'll write down just mucosa, having the interoreceptors. And for general visual efferent, we'll write down involuntary factors, that is the smooth muscle, cardiac muscle and the glands. I will advise my students to always remember this one word answer for each component: skin for the general somatic afferent, skeletal muscle for the general somatic efferent, mucosa for the general visual afferent, and the smooth muscle, cardiac muscle and gland for the general visual efferent. This will help you in making the nervous system concept simple and easy. Now I will demonstrate what are the general and the special functions or the components of the cranial nerve and the spinal nerve. Why we name a function general and why we name a function special. This is the central nervous system consisting of the brain and the spinal cord. Brain coordinate with the body with the help of 12 pair of the cranial nerves. Likewise, spinal cord coordinate with the body with the help of 31 pair of the spinal nerves. Cranial nerve and spinal nerve will form the peripheral nervous system. If we draw a line here, we can say that above the line we've got the head and the face area, and below the line we've got the rest of the body. Head and face area is the main target area of the cranial nerves, while rest of the body is the target area of the spinal nerve. This will be supplied by the spinal nerves. General somatic afferent, general somatic efferent, general visual afferent and general visual efferent. These four are the general functions. But why these are named as general functions? The answer is these four components, these four functions are present throughout the body. We have got skin here for perception of the general stimulus. We have got skin here. We have got skeletal muscle as a voluntary factor here. Yes, we have got skeletal muscle as a voluntary factor here. We have got smooth muscle here in the viscera. We have got smooth muscle and glands also in the head and neck area. So in this way, we can say that These four components are present throughout the body and these will be labeled as the general functions. But what are the special functions? Special functions are those functions that are present only in this area and not in the rest of the body. For example, we have got vision in the head area, we have got smell in the head area, we have got taste in the head area. So these are the few examples that we have got here in the head area and not in the rest of the body. So these functions will be labeled as the special functions and these will be performed only by the cranial nerves. I will explain in my future videos further detail about these special components, but today just remember that we have got general functions in all over the body and we have got special functions only in the head area. Spinal nerves will have the general functions, will perform the general functions in all over the body except the head area. But the cranial nerves will have general functions as well as the special functions. Now I'll demonstrate neuronal composition of spinal nerve components. Spinal nerve components are general somatic afferent, general somatic efferent, general visceral afferent, and general visceral efferent. What is meant by neuronal composition? Neuronal composition is that how many neurons will be required for these four functions. For example, general somatic afferent start from the exterior receptors at the level of the skin and its destination is the central nervous system. So how many neurons will be required for this function? The answer is 3 neurons. Whatever the distance is, whether the sensation is in the lower limb, whether the sensation is in the upper limb, the number of neurons will be constant for this function, that is the 3 neurons. And these 3 neurons are named as the first order neuron, second order neuron and the third order neuron. These neurons are also named as primary, secondary and the tertiary neurons. Now coming to the second component, that is general somatic efferent. Here the information is generated at the level of the central nervous system and its destination is skeletal muscle, that is the voluntary factor. How many neurons are required for this function? The answer is 2 neurons, whatever the distance is. Whether the skeletal muscle is in the lower limb, whether the skeletal muscle is upper limb, the number of neurons will be constant, 2 neurons, and the name is upper motor neuron and the lower motor neuron. Now the general visceral afferent component, this function we have got receptors, interior receptors at the level of mucosa mainly, and from here the information will reach the destination, that is the central nervous system. For this function, how many neurons? The answer is 3 neurons, and these 3 neurons are named similar to the GSA, that is first order, second order and the third order neuron. Now the general visceral efferent component. In the general visceral efferent component, the information is generated at the level of central nervous system and is destined to reach the involuntary effectors, that are the smooth muscle, cardiac muscle and the glands. For this we require 2 neurons, and the 2 neurons for this function are named as the preganglionic neuron and the postganglionic neurons. 2 neurons are preganglionic and the postganglionic neurons. So note down the neuronal composition of these 4 functions of the spinal nerves. I'll now draw these neurons over the spinal cord. But before drawing these components of the spinal cord, I will show you the general structure of the spinal cord. Spinal cord has gray matter, and around gray matter it has got the white matter. Gray matter has got the neuron cell bodies and white matter has got the fibers of the cell bodies. So this is the spinal cord, and from here 2 roots emerge. One root has got a swelling, that is the dorsal root. This is the swelling. On both sides we will have a dorsal root that has got a swelling. This one is the dorsal root, and then the motor root or the ventral root that hasn't got a swelling, that is smarter. This one is the ventral root. Okay, dorsal and ventral root join for a distance to form the spinal nerve. This one is the spinal nerve. This one is the spinal nerve. Spinal nerve immediately divides into two, into a minor ramus, that is the dorsal ramus, and into a major ramus, that is the ventral ramus. This is the minor dorsal ramus, whose target area is very much small, and this is the ventral ramus, whose target area is very much larger. If we draw a line in the center, we will have a structure over the posterior aspect. They will name as dorsal parts of the spinal cord, and over the front we will have the structure that will be labeled as the ventral parts of the spinal cord and spinal nerve. So look at here, this is the gray matter horn, this is the dorsal horn of the gray matter, and this one is the ventral horn of the gray matter. Here we have got the dorsal white matter, here we have got the ventral white matter. This root that has got a swelling is present over the dorsal aspect. This is the dorsal root, and this root that is smarter over the ventral aspect is the ventral root. This is the ramus over the dorsal aspect. This is the dorsal ramus, and this is the larger ramus over the ventral aspect. So this is the ventral ramus of the spinal nerve. We've got a gray matter of the spinal cord that is present in the center. It has got four horns, two dorsal horns, which are the sensory horns, and two ventral horns. These are the ventral horns, which are motor horns. Round the gray matter, we have got the white matter. This is the white matter. So this is the spinal cord, and this is the limit of the CNS. These roots are not the part of the central nervous system. These are the parts of the peripheral nervous system. So this one is the dorsal root. Here is the dorsal root, and here is the ventral root. This one is the ventral root. These two roots join to form the spinal nerve. This one is the spinal nerve that is formed by union of the dorsal root and the ventral root. This is the spinal nerve, and we define spinal nerve like it is the nerve that is made by union of the dorsal root and the ventral root. After the formation, spinal nerve immediately divide into a minor dorsal ramus. This one is the dorsal ramus, and major ventral ramus. This one is the ventral ramus. Also note down that dorsal root is pure sensory and ventral root is pure motor. Dorsal root is pure sensory, ventral root is pure motor. When these two roots will join, we will get a spinal nerve that is mixed. And after that, whether it is the dorsal ramus, whether it is the ventral ramus, both are mixed. Now I show you how the neurons of the different components start from their origin and reach the destination. First of all, the general somatic efferent component. This component consists of three neurons: first order, second order, and third order neuron. The cell body of the first order neuron is present in the dorsal root, and its name is dorsal root ganglia. This neuron has got a peripheral process which is carrying information from a receptor in the skin, that is the exterior receptor, and this neuron has got a central process that will move to the central nervous system spinal cord dorsal horn, that is the sensory horn. Here it will synapse with the second order neuron, and now the second order neuron will cross to the opposite side and will ascend and reach the thalamus. Here it will synapse with the third order neuron, and third order neuron will ascend and reach the destination, and the destination is the parietal lobe of the cerebral hemisphere. This parietal lobe area is also named as the Broadband area 312. So I will repeat, general somatic efferent component has got three neurons. First order neuron is present in the dorsal root ganglia with a peripheral process and with a central process. The first order neuron will synapse with the second order neuron in the dorsal horn, and then second order neuron will cross and ascend and will reach the thalamus, where it will synapse with the third order neuron, and third order neuron will reach the destination, that is the parietal lobe. Now coming to the general somatic efferent component, that consists of two neurons named as the upper motor neuron and the lower motor neuron. The upper motor neuronal cell body is present in the frontal lobe of the cerebral cortex. This frontal lobe of the cerebral cortex is also known as the Brodmann area 4-6. And from here, the upper motor neuron will descend, will cross to the opposite side, and will reach the ventral horn of the spinal cord. That is the motor horn. Here it will synapse with the lower motor neuron, and lower motor neuron will come out of the spinal cord and will reach the skeletal muscle that it has to supply. So I will repeat. General somatic efferent component has got upper motor neuron and lower motor neuron. Upper motor neuron start in the frontal lobe area 4-6. It descend and cross to the opposite side, and it reaches the ventral horn of the spinal cord, where it will synapse with the lower motor neuron, and lower motor neuron will come out of the spinal cord and will reach the destination, that is the skeletal muscle. And now the general visual efferent component. This component is for supplying the smooth muscle, glands, and the cardiac muscle. These are the involuntary effectors. For this function, general visual efferent component has got two neurons, and two neurons are the preganglionic neuron and the postganglionic neuron. Preganglionic neuron cell body is present here in the spinal cord. This is a separate horn. This is a third horn present between the dorsal horn and the ventral horn. This horn is known as the intermediolateral horn. From here, the neuron will come out through the ventral root of the spinal cord and then through the ventral rami. After that, this neuron will move toward the organ, and before reaching the organ, it will synapse with the second neuron, and then second neuron will reach the destination, that is the involuntary effector. And here you can note down, we have got a synapse and a cell body that is outside the central nervous system. This is the true ganglia of the autonomic nervous system. Keep in mind, all the true ganglia belong to the general visual efferent component of the autonomic nervous system. So I will repeat, general visual efferent component consists of two neurons, preganglionic neuron that is starting at the intermediolateral horn, and a postganglionic neuron whose destination is the viscera, that is the involuntary effector. The preganglionic neuron is present in the intermediolateral horn of the spinal cord. From here it will come out through the ventral root and then through the ventral ramus. It will come out and it will synapse with the second neuron, that is the postganglionic neuron. This is a true ganglia, and postganglionic neuron will reach the destination, that is the smooth muscle gland or the cardiac muscle. So this is preganglionic neuron and this is postganglionic neuron. And now the last component, that is the general visual efferent component. This component consists of three neurons, that is the first order neuron, second order neuron, and the third order neuron. The cell body of the first order neuron is present in the dorsal root here, and it has got a peripheral process and a central process. Central process move inside the spinal cord where it synapses with the second order neuron. Second order neuron will cross, ascend, and will reach the thalamus, where it will synapse with the third order neuron, and third order neuron will reach the destination, that is the parietal lobe. The peripheral process of the first order neuron will come out of the spinal cord and will reach the mucosa, where it has got interoreceptors that carry the information about the internal environment that is not in our consciousness. Here you can note down very important facts, that the general visual efferent component neurons follow the neurons of the general somatic efferent component in the spinal cord and in the brain. But outside the spinal cord, general visual efferent component fibers will follow the general visual efferent fibers. The second important fact that you can note down here is that in dorsal root ganglia, we have the neuronal cell bodies of general somatic efferent component and the general visual efferent component. And these cell bodies are without synapse. So this is a ganglia, and this ganglia is the false ganglia. And os ganglia is always present in the dorsal root, and it carries the cell bodies of the first order neuron of general somatic efferent component as well as the general visual efferent component. That's why it is said that false ganglia is always a sensory ganglia. Like I said, the true ganglia is always a ganglia of the general visual efferent component. And third important fact that we can learn from here is about the ascending tracts and the descending neuronal tracts. These tracts are given in your books in your nervous anatomy chapter. Keep in mind that general somatic afferent component is actually the ascending tract. If we go into the detail of the general somatic afferent component, this will be the ascending tracts. And general somatic efferent component is about the descending tract. In all kind of descending tracts, first neuron will be present in the dorsal root, second neuron will cross and ascend and will synapse with third order neuron in the thalamus, and third order neuron will reach the destination, that is the parietal lobe. These facts are common to all the ascending tracts. And in the descending tracts, we will have two neurons, an upper motor neuron, that cell body is present in the frontal lobe, and a lower motor neuron whose cell body is present in the ventral horn of the spinal cord.